Tonight on Free Minds TV, we'll be telling you why a union is not very happy with an Eagle Scout. We'll also be getting into license plate readers in California, the Downsizer Dispatch, the economy, and a whole lot more. All coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
And welcome to a brand new edition of Free Minds TV. It is episode 135, and as always, it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And this is the show where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box by bringing you stories from around the United States and around the world where governments, for the most part, usually is what we're reporting on, are overstepping their bounds and ruining lives, not helping them. So we try to peruse the internet and other news sources to find some hot-hitting news stories and then bring them to you with a different kind of a twist, a small government twist, in fact. I wanted to start off with this first one coming out of Pennsylvania, Allentown to be more specific, where an Eagle Scout has found himself in a lot of hot water with a union there because of his Eagle Scout project. Yes, Kevin Anderson, who has worked for over 250 hours clearing out a 1,000-foot walking and biking path in one of the local parks in Allentown, he's in trouble. Well, how much trouble, we're not really sure. That depends on what a local union there is going to do. The Local Service Employees International Union, which is one of those city unions, is thinking about filing a grievance against the Boy Scouts and against they say maybe the Cub Scouts. I guess they're a little bit confused about what an Eagle Scout is, because, well, he took our jobs. He did our volunteer work. What we were supposed to get paid to do is essentially what the union president, Nick Balzano, is saying. What he's arguing is that, well, we had a contract to do these things, and, well, we didn't do it fast enough. The Eagle Scout got on the ball first, did it for free, and they're really upset. This is 250 hours they think that they are deserved pay for that, well, an Eagle Scout did for free. They're also issuing warnings saying that they don't want volunteers to be doing other things. And we've talked about this before, Nick, where we have volunteers doing things rather than city employees doing things. It oftentimes really upsets the city employees, even though you're saving money. I mean, getting volunteers to do stuff, Eagle Scouts, that's great. I mean, not only is it fostering a whole lot of community support, getting the community involved in making a park look nice, but it's also saving taxpayers a lot of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the problem that the city employees union has with this is that that money that's being saved kind of goes towards projects that they work on, although they're getting their salary either way. I mean, I don't think there's too many situations where you see volunteer efforts actually replacing employees on the city level. I mean, they might just not do as much if you're working for the city. You might just not do that job and just kind of kill a few hours that you would have been working on a project that a volunteer picked up. But overall, I think that the opposition from the unions and from the city workers, is that they realize that if people were allowed to volunteer freely, in the aggregate, there might be enough people volunteering that the city didn't need to hire quite so many city workers.
Yeah, and actually in Allentown, like many towns, they had a bunch of layoffs over the past year with the down economy. So they're worried that they'll say, well, maybe we could replace even more jobs with volunteers. And so that's worrisome.
Well, the thing that bothers me about this is that supposedly if you work for government, you're a public servant. Now, there's a lot of bureaucratic positions, and it's not necessarily the fault of the people in them, but I think that a lot of people working for government don't really provide as much of a service as they might try to lead us to believe. So I have a serious problem with public servants unionizing at all, because the idea, in theory, is that the taxpayers, the people, are essentially the management. They're the ones who employ these people, and the people working for government are working for an agency that's supposed to exist to serve the people, not the other way around. And when you have an adversarial position between labor, in this case government workers, and management, which in theory are the people and the people's representatives, I think that's a problem. If you want to unionize, if you're in the private sector, fine. But I mean, here in New Hampshire, you're not actually allowed to form a union if you're a public servant or a public sector worker. You're allowed to form associations.
Well, they have
but
teacher unions and such.
They have associations, but they don't have a legally protected ability to strike.
Oh, really?
You know, the protections are actually, they're different. But technically, firefighters, police, teachers in the state of New Hampshire can't form unions, and I don't have any problem with that at all, because it's taxpayers who cut the paychecks, and in theory they're doing that because they want those people to be there to serve them, not because they want to give government workers a cushy benefits package. That's just not the reason for government to exist, as much as the SEIU might want it to be.
Yeah, and I also think that if someone wants to volunteer and clean up a local park or pick up trash on the side of the road or whatever it is, volunteer your time to do something nice for the community, you should definitely be allowed to do it. Spruce up things, make it look better, make things look good, bring the community together, plus you save tax dollars.
But I thought that was what people were supposed to do, is volunteer, help their communities. That's what you're told to do. That's the conventional wisdom, but when it interferes with a unionized labor force, that creates some problems.
Yes. All right, Nick. Well, we do have to shift gears here a little bit, go over to California, where, well, Big Brother's stepping in a little bit and creating a little 1984 type scenario as technology improves. Well, we've talked many times that this technology can be used for good, or it can also be used for some things that will make me a little bit nervous as to how far government can go into intruding in our lives and knowing pretty much everything about us, where we're going, where we're headed, where we're coming from. And there's some new news coming from California about license plates?
Yeah, it's actually coming from a couple of wealthy communities in the Bay Area of California. And when I originally read the story, from the headline, it seemed like a story I would hear coming out of the UK. But of course, programs started in places like the United Kingdom are going to work their way over here. And that's one of the reasons that we report so heavily on events coming out of the United Kingdom where there are civil liberties violations and privacy violations going on, because those nanny state measures going on in the UK today are going to be here in your communities tomorrow if you don't do something about it. A novel anti-crime surveillance program that will record the license plate number of every car entering and leaving Tiburon should be up and running within 6 months, officials said on Thursday. The town council voted 4-0 to install 6 cameras that recognize license plate characters on Tiburon Boulevard and Paradise Drive. Those are the only 2 roads that feed into the Tiburon Peninsula, which also includes the smaller city of Belvedere. So you've got a couple of wealthy communities. The article goes on to say that these are affluent communities with a crime rate that's already quite low. So essentially what you have here are rich people who want to keep the riffraff out, would be my read on it. And apparently the city council, at least, is willing to sacrifice these people's privacy to do that. How safe it will make people, I don't know. In theory, the system is going to allow police to check, or it's going to issue an alert every time a license plate number that matches the license plate number of a car that's been reported stolen. It's going to issue an alert every time it picks up one of those numbers.
When I was reading the article, it states that it's not only going to be used for stolen cars, but it can essentially be used to track anyone you want to know. You know someone has a car registered to them and you want to track their whereabouts. You'll easily be able to do that automatically. Just type it into the computer, we're looking for this license plate, and automatically when they drive in or out of the city on these only 2 roads that go in or out, they'll be able to nail exactly where they are. So it's not just going to be used for tracking stolen cars, it's going to be used for tracking anyone who has a car registered who might have a warrant out, or just interested parties, or you haven't registered your car or whatnot. It just automatically goes into computer system, scans it, and then lets police officers know where their searched for person is. Or
right, well, in theory. I mean, the problem when you're tracking the license plate numbers
you don't know the driver.
You don't know who's actually driving the vehicle. So it could, you're going to be monitoring thousands and thousands of license plates. Inevitably, there are going to be situations that arise that might appear suspicious, like somebody in this community has a restraining order out against somebody else. Well, maybe their friend or somebody that they know personally is borrowing their car and is going to that community for some other purpose. Are police going to issue a warrant based on the presumption that a restraining order has been violated? That's one plausible scenario out of many that could arise when you've got a surveillance system like this, because it gives the police enough information to be dangerous, but not necessarily enough information to actually be able to ascertain that they in fact have the right person or understand the set of circumstances correctly.
Yeah, this is, I mean, on paper people say, well, if you're not stealing cars, what do you have to hide? This is going to protect law-abiding citizens, and that's what it might sound like. but it can also be used in some pretty dire ways. I mean, you mentioned one of them, but what if, say, you have a dispute with a police officer? Let's face it, police officers are people too, so let's say they don't like you. This is a very easy way to track your whereabouts and target you, because easily they can just put into the system to flag whenever your car is coming up. A very easy way to track your whereabouts wherever you're going. It could easily be abused. And while I know that this technology seems really cool, seems like it is just out there to protect law-abiding citizens, there are many ways that this technology can be abused and putting it up can be abused. So I don't like the idea of it, Nick. It puts a bad taste in my mouth, tracking the whereabouts of cars. It's only a step behind a GPS that lets people know the whereabouts of every car.
The technology kind of sanitizes it to some extent, because, I mean, we're getting to the point now where facial recognition software and technology is taking off. And quite frankly, a lot of governments are going to try to push to get biometrics, face scans, iris scans, things like that, put into your ID. So they'll actually be able to have a reference against, say, your face or your eyes. So they'll actually be able to track you as an individual wherever you go that they have, say, facial recognition readers up.
Well, it's anywhere there's a camera. The technology goes to the point of they don't even need to install state-of-the-art HD cameras or anything. It can be done with existing cameras, the crap cameras that are already on the street. Can be used if you just put in the right software into computer systems.
And some people will say, well, if we have the technology, why not use it? Maybe it'll reduce crime. But if this had been 20 years ago and the proposal was, well, let's actually hire government agents to track where people are at all times, and they would actually just have people working for government tracking you. I mean, that was done 20 years ago, but it wasn't really considered in a free society. I mean, maybe if you're somebody who's actually under investigation for a particular alleged, criminal violation, that would happen to you with a court actually signing off and giving the proper authorization. But the only places where something like that would happen 20 years ago were, say, East Germany, Moscow, places like that. Places that were not free countries, because governments in a free society are not tracking where their citizens are at all times.
A free citizen should be able to move about freely without the government even being concerned about their whereabouts. But anyways, we do need to move on, Nick. This is certainly a topic I'm sure we're going to be touching on many times in the future as technology improves and more places, cities, towns, states start to employ this.
There's going to be all kinds of technology there to track people, and it's only going to get easier for governments that want to do it.
Right, and cheaper too. Anyways, we do need to move on. Speaking of what governments are doing, we like to allow people to at least let their elected officials in Washington know how they feel about certain issues. We try to do that each week with the Downsizer Dispatch. What's on tap this week, Nick?
Well, we're focusing in on the fact that the EPA is looking at rewriting the Clean Air Act. Now, you might wonder why the EPA is actually writing law. Well, we've talked about it on the show before. Bureaucracies do it all the time. You don't actually, well, in the current state of affairs, it seems you don't actually need Congress to write laws for them to have the force of law over the American people. Although, with the constitutional framework we're supposed to live under, every law that Americans are expected to follow should be enacted by Congress. And this focuses in on one particular case where the Supreme Court ruled in Massachusetts versus the EPA that the EPA must regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. But the Clean Air Act doesn't actually say anything about greenhouse gases, or it didn't in its original form as it was enacted by Congress. So they're going to simply write those changes in. What the EPA is looking to do is classify greenhouse gases as pollutants, raise the trigger point for regulatory control of this new class of pollutants, and create a legal double standard between big and small emitters of greenhouse gases. So these are arbitrary decisions not being made by people who at least supposedly represent the American people. These are decisions being made by members of the executive branch who weren't elected. They were appointed, and the people who are actually writing this probably weren't even confirmed by the Senate or any other branch of government. So essentially what you have is the judicial branch telling the executive branch to legislate, and that's just not right. And Downsize DC has the answer with the Write the Laws Act, which would, if passed, force Congress to actually write all of the laws that would have effect over the American people. There wouldn't be any more of, executive agencies like the ATF, the DEA, the FDA writing law. That's not the system of government we're supposed to have in the United States. It's supposed to be a representative system, and you can't be represented at all when you have federal bureaucrats who weren't elected writing the laws. So go to downsizedc.org, pledge your support for the Write the Laws Act or whatever else is up there that you find interesting.
A remarkable idea. Think of it. Your elected officials actually writing the laws.
Seems like a modest proposal.
Oh my goodness. Anyways, we do need to move along. When we come back, we're going to be getting into some police abuse with the video to show you what's going on, as well as more news on the economy. And unfortunately, it's still dire, doom and gloom.
Well, sort of.
Yeah.
There's kind of a silver lining, but it's not a very thick one.
We'll be bringing you that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is Free Minds TV.
Today, Ridley Report. Ridley here from RidleyReport.com. RidleyReport.com. Ridleyography. I am the bomb. And I just want to tell you, you're watching FreeMindsTV.com, and they're like really cool. So you should keep watching them. FreeMindsTV.com. They are good.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
I'd like to invite the viewers to log on to our website, freemindsmedia.org. If the site's not up yet, it is being redone. Check back in a couple of days. It should be up any day now. It should be back up and running to fullest capacity. So check it out, freemindsmedia.org. All right, Nick, I wanted to get into a story about a video. I was on YouTube earlier this week, and I stumbled across a video of a BART police officer, an Oakland, California area transit police officer, captured on video slamming a suspect's head through a big old heavy glass window.
It sounds like it would be unpleasant.
It definitely did not look pleasant for either the officer or the suspect, actually. But then I decided to dig around and find out the real meat of this story, get into it. What was this officer doing, shoving a man's head through a heavy glass window? It turns out that the officer, the BART officer, who is not being named in this story, the police department is withholding his name, found a Michael Gibson on a plane acting erratically. He said he was intoxicated and escorted him off of the train. As you can see in the video that's up, he proceeded to walk him right into the glass wall that he put his head through, and then put him on the ground and cuff him and all that jazz. During the scuffle, when the police officer shoved Michael Gibson's head through the glass fell on not only Gibson but also on the officer. At which point the officer is now pressing charges against Michael Gibson for battery on an officer with injury and resisting arrest because he got cut by the glass that the officer shoved the suspect's head through, as well as public intoxication.
That doesn't really sound like battery to me.
Well, it just seems so funny that I shove your head through a window, the glass falls on me, and now I charge you with assault because I got cut by the glass. It just
seems like it should be the other way around, doesn't it? Like what the officer did.
Yeah, and
might maybe be assault when you just shove somebody's head through.
Yeah, and the full details of this story, they're not all coming to light yet, because while the police officer isn't claiming that the man was intoxicated, Michael Gibson was intoxicated, which is a misdemeanor, public intoxication. The suspect's sister, Lisa Gibson, is claiming that he is bipolar and schizophrenic, and he's under doctor's care, and sometimes he has these episodes if his medication's not working properly or whatnot, and he wasn't under any intoxication under drugs or alcohol. So that's what the sister's alleging, is that the police officer probably should have handled this when he's dealing with someone who's mentally ill rather than
well, even if he was drunk, why would you shove a drunk person's head through a window?
Nick, in today's society, you realize it's become
I can understand
to harass someone who's under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
I can understand subduing somebody who's combative and actually taking them into custody. But there's a difference between...
And this is heavy glass. Like, looking up at this video, this is not just a plate glass window. This is that heavy-duty glass that you find in...
It takes quite a bump to put somebody's head through something
like
that.
Quite the bump. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this man's facing a couple of felony charges here, as well as the misdemeanor. Felony charges because the police officer caught himself shoving his head through the wall, and then the misdemeanor on public intoxication, which may be thrown out if it is ruled that he has schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and that's what was causing his disruptions. I did also want to point out that this is the same police department that in January had an officer on video execute a man, and straight up that's what the video shows. We'd show it here, but it's too graphic to show. There's a suspect on the ground, and police officer just walks up to him with a gun and pulls the trigger.
For those who, I mean, you can find that
it's
on
right
YouTube.
It's on YouTube. I didn't want to show it, though, because it is extremely
graphic. If you search BART police execution, something like that, it's pretty cut and dry. I mean, it's pretty clear that it wasn't any kind of a defensive shooting.
No, and
it was execution style. As I recall, the guy was on his knees.
Yeah, I'll put it. Oh yeah, he was subdued. There was no danger about this, and that officer is actually on trial for murder. So I'll put a link up on the show notes.
I mean, he did.
Well, there's video of it. If there wasn't video, who knows what would have happened? But there was video, and there was all sorts of riots and stuff after that. But this is the same police department, and you usually see corruption in police departments run the gamut this way. So we'll see if anything comes from this. The police officers are absolutely seeing a members area. Well, maybe we'll put it up on the members area. Anyways,
it's not a bad idea.
It is not a bad idea. But anyways, you can find it easily on YouTube. We'll see if anything happens. The police department fully defending this BART police officer's actions. To me, watching the video, it seems like there was excessive force, but we'll let you guys be the judge. If you have a different opinion, though, FMTV at freemindsmedia.org is how to contact us. All right, Nick, we do it often. I like to bring the gloom. We like to bring the doom. I listen to NPR, and they tell me the economy's picking up, the recession's over, we're seeing job numbers go up, or actually unemployment numbers go down. Personally, we've talked about how that's probably because their benefits are running out. But anyways, from my news stories that I listen to, they say the recession's evening out. Is this true? What does Free Minds TV have to say?
Well, I mean, let's get into the report here. What we're going over here is the government's estimate of economic activity in the third quarter. They do 3 readings of this. This is a second reading. Sort of kind of good news, but not really if you actually read between the lines and read the details. The economy is growing modestly, with consumers too wary about spending to invigorate the recovery. The economy did grow at a 2.8% rate last quarter, less than originally estimated. So it's growing. Technically, when you get economic growth, you don't have a recession anymore. But as we said, it's less than originally estimated. And forecasts for the current quarter are for similarly slight growth before a drop-off next year. So we get to look forward to things slowing down. The main reason is that, well, the unemployment rate is high. About 10% of Americans are out of work. And that number is probably going to continue to grow, even if we do continue to see economic growth. The consensus among economists right now, the most popular theory, is that unemployment will reach as high as 11% next year before making a slow descent, and it could take at least 4 years for the unemployment rate to drop back down to more normal levels.
What's that, like 4 or 5%?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, you're looking at
That's
4 or 5 years of a bad job market, slow growth. They're predicting perhaps, and this is all speculative, perhaps around 1% growth in the year to come because, well, the stimulus package money, that's running out. That's really the only thing propping the economy up and keeping it from remaining in what it would technically be a recession. Although I would point out that, personally, I think there's a lot more inflation going on than we've seen at the consumer level yet, than most people are aware of. And if that's the case, even if the inflation rate is a couple % higher than what the government's figures are, then you really don't have any real growth going on at all, because if you don't adjust for inflation, then it doesn't really mean you're having any kind of actual growth. you're essentially just printing more dollars. So of course prices are going to go up, and it's going to look like the country's producing more things or more value, but it's not. So I think it's going to depend, and there is a chance that we could edge back into what would technically be a recession, where we're actually seeing a contraction of the economy. Personally, I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the economy is, while it may be technically out of recession, it may be recovering. For the average American, the average person just trying to pay their mortgage, if they still have a mortgage, just trying to get by, things aren't going to be looking a whole lot better for the next few years, whether we're technically in a recession or not. And that's the best case scenario. I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but we've talked about on the show, the deck is sort of stacked against the U.S. economy because of excessive debt and excessive government intervention in the markets. And I'm not going to say for sure that we're not going to see a second leg down that couldn't be as bad as what we saw the first time. I'm just not prepared to say that, and only time is going to tell on that. Overall, I'm not terribly optimistic on what the U.S. economy is going to be doing over the next 5-10 years. That's not to say that individual people aren't going to be able to do better. I mean,
right.
you can still make more money, get a job, get promotions during a recession. It's more difficult. You've got a lot more competition. But just because people are telling you we're in a recession or unemployment is high, that doesn't mean you can't get a job.
Yeah, and it's
also more difficult. For sure,
a place where a lot of companies are becoming much more efficient. There's much less waste going on.
Well, I mean, and households too.
If you're talking about waste, you're talking about going green. Well, a recession might actually be a good thing, because you are going to become more efficient. You are going to become less wasteful, not only as a business, but also as on your personal life as well. So you know what? There's a silver lining in everything, right, Nick?
Yeah, I guess
more
so.
green
I mean,
now. I don't know.
I still think we're going to see inflation that's a lot worse too. So
well, that's depressing.
I guess you can look for a silver lining.
If you have a lot of debt, inflation is good.
That's true. It'll eat away at your debt. Your debt will be worth, in real terms, a whole lot less. So if you got a lot of debt, you still got a mortgage, inflation could actually be good for you if you got, say, a fixed rate mortgage. Yeah. And if you can make it in this economy, I think you're pretty well positioned to make it in any economy. So I think adversity can bring out the best in people, and a lot of how this recession or these economic times affect your life is really up to you. I mean, you might not be able to control whether you get laid off or not, whether your mortgage rate readjusts. Some people still have arms out there, adjustable rates, but you can control how you react to those things and the attitude that you approach life with. And I think that's important. I think that's more important than GDP figures. I think that's more important than the rate of inflation. So, I mean, if there's a positive note to take away from this, it's that you, the viewer, probably have a lot more control over how this economy is going to affect you and over your own personal economy than you might think.
There you go. So it's all in your hands, right? Anyways, we are out of time for the week. But if you have a different opinion, we'd love to hear it. fmtv@freemindsmedia.com is the email address. freemindsmedia.com or org, I guess, is also the way that you can go on our website, check out the radio show, as well as all the archives, the members area, only $3 a month or $30 a year, and a whole lot more up at freemindsmedia.org. All right, until next week, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Check out Free Minds Radio, which is live every Sunday from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great week.